If you're a new company, new wave, next generation company trying to dislodge an incumbent, my rough impression over time is to dislodge the incumbent, you've got to have about an order of magnitude improvement in economics. Now, that can come from improved benefits or reduced cost or both.
Right.
But it's you got to be 10 times better than the incumbent to dislodge them. So that has an impact on your pricing. And if you're going against other next generation companies, who do you want to be? Do you want to be the premium price? And do you have the product to back it up? Do you want to be the low cost leader? And have you got the economics to back that up? Or do you just want to kind of go into the nosh pit at kind of the same price as everyone else and battle it out? All three are, my snide comments on them notwithstanding, all three are perfectly valid strategies. But pick a strategy and be able to defend it and be able to back it up in your marketing, as you said, the media acquisition, in your marketing, in your sales channel, in your financial analysis, right? Know what you're doing.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
I am Kevin Lee with the E-Marketing Association. I have a bunch of other day jobs, including running Did It, a digital-first marketing agency. And a lot of what really matters in marketing is having enough margin to afford marketing. And in order to have good margin, you need proper pricing. So I'm super excited to be chatting with Steve Plume today, who focuses on that area of mispriced products and services and leaving a bunch of money on the table that you might not have known was there. So obviously, for those folks who have taken courses in MBAs and such, and they have sort of the basics of pricing, they may have missed a bunch of the nuances as it relates to pricing in action. So Steve, I'd love you to maybe talk a little bit about the implications of mispriced products or services on essentially the survivability and growth trajectories of companies that you've worked with.
Sure. So my database of companies is somewhere north of 100 pricing projects over the last couple of decades, mostly in B2B SaaS, not exclusively. But I think the lessons are broadly applicable to kind of any industry. I've done quite a bit of B2C SaaS as well. You just change the KPIs that you're looking at, right? And the things are still, and you change the guardrails that are standard in the industry. SaaS has really high gross margins. Not all enterprises do. Not all industries do. Specifically to your question, what's the implication? I'll throw a question back for you to respond to. But if you're a new company, new wave, next generation company trying to dislodge an incumbent, my rough impression over time is to dislodge the incumbent, you've got to have about an order of magnitude improvement in economics. Now, that can come from improved benefits or reduced cost or both.
Right.
But it's you got to be 10 times better than the incumbent to dislodge them. So that has an impact on your pricing. And if you're going against other next generation companies, who do you want to be? Do you want to be the premium price? And do you have the product to back it up? Do you want to be the low cost leader? And have you got the economics to back that up? Or do you just want to kind of go into the nosh pit at kind of the same price as everyone else and battle it out? All three are, my snide comments on them notwithstanding, all three are perfectly valid strategies. But pick a strategy and be able to defend it and be able to back it up in your marketing, as you said, the media acquisition, in your marketing, in your sales channel, in your financial analysis, right? Know what you're doing in the market. And you really, especially these days where revenue growth is absolutely paramount, speed of revenue growth. If you're priced too low, you can't really make it up on volume. And your revenue growth is going to fall below the benchmarks that you're expecting, that your investors are looking for, that the market anticipates. So that's the early stage. Companies that are really in trouble, I find the problem is rarely pricing. So we'll kind of cut that group out. The pricing may be a problem, but it's not the problem. It's not the existential problem. So let's talk about companies that are healthy and growing and everything looks good. In that case, pricing is not really a problem, but it's an opportunity. And I have never gone into a company, and my database is my database. It's 100-ish, right? And there are tens of thousands of companies out there. But I personally have never gone in and looked at pricing where there wasn't an opportunity to capture both more revenue and more margin. And my favorite, fairly recent example, B2C company, they were chunking along, great margins, great growth at 35 million bucks ARR. And unbeknownst to me at the time, they set up an internal dashboard of new revenue generated exclusively from pricing. And a year later, they showed it to me. And we'd gotten them an extra $6 million of revenue just from pricing. And if you think about the income statement of a SaaS company, that just drops to the bottom line, right? There's no incremental cost of goods. So now that's $6 million extra in gross margin that you can spend on R&D, you can spend it on customer acquisition, or you can just return it to profit. And that's a thing of beauty. And that's really where the opportunity of getting your pricing right lies.
Yeah, those are great examples. As a marketer in most of my day jobs, whether it's for Did It and other clients or for myself, one of the things that seems to ring true for me is that, certainly finding the right price for a specific ICP is key. So from the segment perspective, but also understanding the implications of LTV on the ability to go out and buy more media aggressively, right? So if media in an auction-based environment is sort of scarce at the price you want to pay, you may have to pay more, right? And your ability to pay more has to do with price and LTV. So part of that is price. And so as it relates to sort of finding the sweet segments that are perhaps more willing to pay a higher price or see more value from a SaaS product or from another product, what's the process that you find is best to identify those ICPs where there's more price elasticity?
We're going for 2 hours, right? Okay, let me try to be concise. For now, unless you stop me, I'm gonna kind of follow the same process I did in my previous response and say let's talk about really early stage companies first. There's been a lot of thinking and writing about how and where to launch and why, ranging from, I mean, you and I are old enough to remember Clayton Christensen and Jeffrey Moore. More recently, there are other names who are kind of, upgrading that. But I think the key theme is when you're going to market, you should be taking one solution to one problem to one cohesive cohort of customers who all are experiencing that same problem and really, really care about it. You can't, the problem you're addressing cannot be fourth on a list of 3. Right. That's where my usual upgrade status is at the gate, 4th on the list of 3, and I'm back in coach, right? And if you're not on the top 3, you won't get purchased that year.
Yeah.
And so when you're in that space, then you're looking at how do you find the best price for that market entry? And there are really 3 ways to think about this. One is your internal company strategy, right? Strategy meets the real world. Mm-hmm. Well, your price determines your channel, or your channel determines your price. Think about them that way, right?
Yeah.
Are you going to be self-service on the web? Are you going to be, a download? Are you going to be sold indirect sales? Are you going to be sold direct sales? Those orders of magnitude. And if you've got a mismatch, your company's not going to be successful. So that's the first start. The second dimension is your competition for that solution with that cohort. And your competition, if nothing else, is customers trying to do it themselves. Manual processes, build it their own, whatever. There's always that competition, no matter what. And you should really understand what the cost of that is and what the problems with that are. Most likely, you're either going against a legacy incumbent, or you're going against a bunch of other early stage companies. and you really should understand what their pricing models are. Models as important as price, frankly. We'll get back to model shortly. And where you want to be positioned relative to them. I'll throw a question back for you to respond to. But if you're a new company, new wave, next generation company trying to dislodge an incumbent, my rough impression over time is to dislodge the incumbent, you've got to have about an order of magnitude improvement in economics. Now, that can come from improved benefits or reduced costs or both.
Right.
But it's you got to be 10 times better than the incumbent to dislodge them. So that has an impact on your pricing. And if you're going against other next generation companies, who do you want to be? Do you want to be the premium price? And do you have the product to back it up? Do you want to be the low cost leader? And have you got the economics to back that up? Or do you just want to kind of go into the nosh pit at kind of the same price as everyone else and battle it out? All three are, my snide comments on them notwithstanding, all three are perfectly valid strategies. But pick a strategy and be able to defend it and be able to back it up in your marketing, as you said, the media acquisition, in your marketing, in your sales channel, in your financial analysis, right? Know what you're doing. As you get beyond your market entry ICP, okay, you're $5 million, you're $30 million, you're $100 million. I don't really care. Because now you're talking about more than one market segment.
Right.
Typically that next set of customers were not your original ICP because your solution is not as valuable to them.
Right.
They are a lot more price sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
And quick sidebar, one of the huge strategic mistakes I see early stage companies making is drifting out of their ICP into what Jeff Moore called the early majority, right? And Regis McKenna, the early majority. Because those customers, your solution's not as valuable to them, and they will bang on you for a lower price. And if you talk to them enough times, because humans are stimulus response machines, consciously or unconsciously, your price will drop. And I can see it in the data in company after company after company over decade after decade after decade. The pattern never changes when you stray outside of the ICP. So now you're in your second segment. I warned you we're going for 2 hours, or third segment, or whatever, your nth customer segment. You don't want to pollute your pricing, your high pricing, with the people who really need you the most.
Right.
So they're now they're great labels. The first place I saw them was from the Willingness to Pay guy, whose first name is Ulrich and last name escapes me. It's Danish, but he's got great content in it on his book and on his website, to give credit where credit is due. And what he talks about is fencing and layering. And so let's talk about layering first, because it's easy. That's just the good, better, best that we're all familiar with. Mm-hmm. Free, regular, and premium. You're stacking functionality one on top of the other, and you want to make sure the functionality has really big moats between your layers. Yeah. Partially so you don't get bleeding back and forth. Someone has to clearly self-identify, I want that or that. And you can use that to make sure that all your customers in segment A are always going to go premium, whereas some of your customers in segment B may go to the normal version. Mm-hmm. I think we're all familiar with that. The one we're also probably less consciously familiar with, but we see it in many places, is the fencing. And that's actually offering overlapping but different solutions to different market segments. Right. So it's not about good, better, best. It's about chocolate, vanilla, strawberry. And usually you'll have kind of the same underlying technology platform, but you'll have built different functionality on top of that. And then you can price those differently. Vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry don't have to be the same price. They can be significantly different prices. Mm-hmm. But you're still not giving up your margin on your premium product to your premium customers.
Is that also often a sort of unbundling of something that might be bundled together, where you sort of realize that a particular segment needs, extra this or they want chocolate sauce, right? So
Yeah,
it's not even the flavor of the ice cream, but the chocolate sauce can be really expensive because the one who wants the chocolate sauce is very willing to pay.
yeah, you can do that, and you can look at it in two ways: is bundles and unbundles, or a list of add-ons that anyone can buy.
Right.
Right, all three flavors they can buy chocolate sauce. It just costs a lot of money because it's really valuable, and or it costs us a lot, or whatever the reason is.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. That's the pro version of fencing.
Yeah. Cool. That's really helpful for folks to sort of construct this. I would imagine that when you come into a company that actually is sort of midstream, right? Maybe not quite mature yet, but has a
Mm-hmm.
significant amount of installed base of customers, and you discovered, after the fact, right, that you need to use fencing or layering or some other methodology to extract the value that they're willing to pay, but didn't want to tell you that they were willing to pay, but analysis indicates a likelihood that they're willing to pay, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you go in there without alienating, right? And sort of change your pricing structure? Obviously, you can grandfather people in, right? And just say, okay, well, the new people who fit this ICP, they're going to pay the new price, right? Okay, great. That's fine. And your legacy customers feel even more wonderful because they're underpaying in comparison to being new. But are there other ways to attack that in order to extract some of the value if you've got a large installed base, like some SaaS companies have, and they've suddenly realized like, wow, there's a lot of money we're leaving on the table. So how do you do
Yeah,
that? Sort of, it's almost like a political or positioning problem as it relates to pricing.
yeah. Look, I think young companies and even some more mature companies get way too round around the axle about price increases or price changes. It's much less of a drama than many companies would seem to want to believe. And you can really ameliorate the drama by planning for it. And the first place I really saw this was, geez, there's a really tall building in that city behind my head. Um, uh, Years ago, those guys and many others just, built into their enterprise contracts, there will be a price increase annually upon renewal that shall not exceed blank percent or the CLI was kind of the standard way to do it. And
Yeah.
then lawyers messed up the language, but that was the general concept, right?
Yeah.
And if you're dealing with a really big customer who has a lot of buying leverage, they'll negotiate you down on the percentage of the frequency. But it's
Yeah.
just standard. This is our agreement. We will raise the price every year on you, because inflation exists. It's a real thing, as
Right.
as as many of your listeners may have noticed. There's no reason you can't do that on the B2C side as well. And in fact, in the last 18 months, if I got the timing right, Apple and Google have both made that far, far easier to do, just acknowledging that it has to happen. And so if you plan that, and it's um, it's positioned to your prospects as part of the sales process, um, okay, then the price is going to go up. This is not a shock. I mean, the price of Netflix goes up every year. The price of cable goes up every year. The price of my cell phone doesn't go up every year. But and so part of it is just thinking ahead. And then even if you haven't thought ahead, all the big enterprise custom companies, they change their prices once a year. Just change your price. You'll get a handful of complaints as long as you don't raise it astronomically. And if you do need a big change, or even if it's a small change, grandfather your existing customers for a period of time. Eternal grandfathering makes no sense. If someone wants to pay, you know, 2010 prices in 2025, you don't want them as a customer.
Right.
Make them go away because you're losing money on them. And it's very easy to write your all your existing customers letters saying, rising costs mean we have to raise our prices. We're going to grandfather you for 6 months or until your next renewal, whichever comes first or last, depending on what you do. And you get 3 or 4 angry calls, and that's about it.
Right. Right.
It's not hard.
What else should teams be thinking about as it relates to pricing and mispricing that we didn't cover earlier?
Oh, um, okay. So two big things come to mind, and we may uncover others as we chat.
Right.
Um, First, let me harken back to your pricing model. Okay. I think way too many companies have gotten lazy in the last 10, 12 years and just defaulted to a per seat per month, right? Whether they charge it annually or charge it monthly, kind of irrelevant. The model, the promotional model is as low as $29.99 per month, per seat per month.
Yeah.
Often per seat is really the wrong way to think about it. And not all of your listeners, but you and I remember the days when we wrote long proposals and first we mailed them and then we faxed them and then we emailed them for printing. And my mental model of what went on then, and I know we don't send the proposal, but the point remains the same. Our prospect grabbed the 3 pages, ignored the first two completely, and flipped to the last page, and there's a number on that last page. And she takes that number and she divides it by something that matters to her business. And she either laughs and throws it in the garbage or nods and say, yeah, I can work with this, and picks up the phone. Okay. And so the absolute key to pricing models is understanding what she's dividing by, what matters to her business. And it's actually fairly rare that that's a seat, right? It might be the value of inventory. One of the things we're seeing a lot right now, and I want to come back to this in my second point, but one of the things we're seeing a lot right now is resolved conversations and customer support. Okay, that may be a real metric. SAP used to be brilliant at this. They had a different pricing model for every single product they had, and the ratchet never went down. It's like it was the Michelangelo pricing models. And so you want to understand very clearly what's your customer's unit of value that you're applying to. And that's what your pricing model should be linked to. And the only time I found this to be problematic and unable to get the data to do it properly is in selling to financial management firms, because they don't want to reveal any details about their AUM. And so often the right answer is, how many assets do they have in international bond funds? And they just won't tell you. And so and you can't really guess. And so then you have to find something else. Then you wind up defaulting to numbers of asset managers or whatever it might be. The second thing that I'm sure is on everybody's mind is AI. And how do we price AI? And can we use AI to do pricing? So I think you have to split between foundational AI, which, Chat GPT and Perplexity and the rest of them. And I'm just going to let people way richer and way smarter than I am worry about that, because they're changing it, kind of weekly. And then you have AI bundled into existing apps, and then you have native problem-specific AI. And you may have other categories, but that's roughly how I'm thinking about it. And I think the same general approach and philosophy applies that we've talked about. You still got to go do the work. You got to understand how you want to position. You got to understand the value. AI, the native AI companies are going to cut the legs out from under the legacy vendors that are trying to retrofit. And the thing we're seeing there is outcomes-based pricing is all the rage right now. Outcomes-based pricing comes around every time we have a platform change. A couple of companies make $1 bajillion on it, and then everyone else figures out the new model, and outcomes-based pricing kind of goes away. So that's not to say it's 100% certainty that it's going to go away this time, but we've seen this pattern before, multiple times. And so if you're going to look at outcomes-based pricing, you got to be very, very careful about what's it going to do to your future revenue stream. Because the classic example is anything that saves Okay, so we're not going to charge you at all, but you're going to give us 10% of your savings in inventory. We made 10 million bucks from those guys this year. Okay, well, what's the benchmark for next year?
Yeah. What'd you do for me lately?
Right, you do for and boom, your revenue stream went to zero.
Yeah.
So you have to think through, okay, how does this work?
Yeah.
Right. And okay, go to the support model. I'm going to resolve 100,000 conversations for you this year, and you're going to pay me $1 for each of them. But all that's being brought into the knowledge base, all that's going to be, what if there are only 1,000 conversations to resolve next year? You're going to charge them for 1,000 times the or 10 times the amount you did last year. It runs into complications. That's not to say it's not feasible, but it's more challenging than it looks.
So let's still follow up on the sort of complexity versus simplicity side of things, right? If one of the ways that you can attack various ICPs is sort of, the toppings on the three flavors of ice cream, right? And then you end up realizing, okay, I've got actually 16 flavors of ice cream and 25 toppings. But that hurts the brain of the buyer, right? Because they're not even sure how many toppings they want yet, or if they need all the toppings. So that may be too complex, right? And then there's sort of in between, which is, if you buy the ice cream, you get three free toppings. Okay, so there's still a lot of toppings that I could
Yeah.
choose from, but I pick three. Or maybe it's like the per sprinkle, right, that you add, right? So you can
Right.
get a lot of sprinkles, you can get a little bit of sprinkles, or you can get a lot of chocolate sauce, or you can get a small amount of chocolate sauce. So, once you unbundle and you sort of realize this is a way for me to price differentiate, that, people really value the sprinkles or people really value the caramel or the chocolate sauce. You don't want to make it so complex that the people have the paralysis by analysis, because then they don't buy, right? Because they're buying
Right.
emotionally anyway. They're just justifying it with numbers. So how should the product team think that through, right? Because they should be sitting next to the pricing team or be the same team, right? And think that through, because
Yeah.
the level to which you can adjust your roadmap to reflect the capture of the additional profit could make a huge difference.
Yeah. This is why I always order Jamocha almond fudge at Baskin Robbins, because I walk in and my brain explodes. Um, um, simple brain. What can I say? Uh, yeah. It's been a cliche for, gosh, where to come? World War II. KISS, keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
And so in pricing, what that means is keep it as simple as you can. And so when you talk about, the product team and 16 features functions, wait a minute, which ones offer differential value? Because everything else should just be included.
Right.
Don't have all these options and all these flavors. We used the analogy before of, okay, you could have, let's say you've got 3 fenced products and you can offer, I don't know, extra security to any of the 3 of them. Fine. Okay. Don't offer, I wish I knew more about security, but don't offer 17 variations of security.
Right.
We have security. This is what it is. It adds on to each of these. It costs an extra $40 per month. Done. Right. And you often see these pricing pages that tells you every single feature that's in each of the 3 versions.
Yeah, because they create the grid, right? They've done the basic, pro and enterprise, right? And then you've got this gigantic grid of what's in each of them.
Yeah, no one cares. It's visual noise. It's
Yeah.
sales noise. Reduce it down to, standard does this, professional does this, professional does this that's different, premium does this that's different, and focus on conveying what those differences are,
Right.
rather than, oh, here's our grid of 6 products and 5 of them have this and 4 of them have that, and we have green checks and red X's. It's like, no, would you want to buy that way? If you're a product manager, would you want to buy that way? No, you don't. It's exactly, present with enough complexity to get your point across and not one iota more.
So on the the startup side of things, right? When a startup is sort of a substitute for an incumbent, but not a direct competitor, right? So they're not necessarily looking to switch, but it's two different ways to scoop the ice cream. You could do it with a laser, or you can do it with a scoop, and the laser is sexier, right? But are people really going to want to, create blocks of ice cream with a laser? I don't know, but it is pretty cool. So if it sort of solves the problem, but in a different way, and there's sort of an educational headwind from that, right? That it is really better. Yeah, I mean, you do want to do it this new way. It's better, but there's sort of an uncertainty as to the ability of that new fangled way to do it, right? That becomes sort of a pricing issue that's more based on uncertainty of the buyer, right? Are there any best practices around that when you're sort of in a category where you don't have an immediate comp, right? Because it's a new way of solving a problem.
Well, so there are two things. There's the practical, I've got to deliver this tomorrow, and there's the I have 3 months to think about it. Right. The practical version of that, it bleeds into your marketing message, your training, your educational materials, right? This comes as a package. It's not like pricing is the standalone component of this.
Right.
But there are, at this point, any number of try and buy and try, and return it if you don't like it, or just your subscription runs out. Free pilots, paid pilots. I mean, all kinds of ways to kind of get in the door and let your customer try it at low risk. I have a long-standing bias on that front that free and no risk convert. I mean, certainly companies have been wildly successful with them, but I think they convert less often than making sure your prospect has some skin in the game. I personally believe low risk is a lot better than no risk, because if it's no risk, we've all done this in consumer things. Hi, I never got to it. Can I have another 30 days? And what do you do? Do you say no? No, you need the revenue. You say yes, but oh, geez, yeah, I never got to it. Okay, charge me, and I will get to it. And if I'm not serious, then I won't pay, and you won't waste your time.
Right.
If you have the time, you've got 90 days or 6 months before the release, and you got to get the pricing right. I would really encourage, go do your research. Go do pricing interviews. And there's a really robust methodology, kind of comes in two phases for doing those interviews. And the first is very qualitative, and it helps to be on the phone or on Zoom or in person, right? To actually have real-time contact. Because you're having a kind of framing conversation around what is the metric that matters, why, what kind of value you're going to get out of it. To your point of, hey, there's no real direct competitor, so they can't benchmark me against company X. Well, what's this costing you? How many people spend how much of their time on it every year to get this done? What if I could cut that for you? Would that be a good thing? Yeah, it would. Okay, so, and the way you really want to phrase the question is, what's the most you'd possibly ever pay for that? And you want them to say some crazy number, right? Well, actually, they're going to say what they say, and you kind of narrow in. You do 5 of those calls. You figure out what the highest number is. Then you kick it up by 50%, because then the next round, kind of round 1A, is now I'm calling you and say, hey, I've got this. Do you have this problem? Yes, super. This is what I understand the value is. Do you agree? Yes, super. Hey, would you pay 1.5x for it? And they say, no, you're crazy. We say, okay, would you pay 1.4, 1.3, 1.2? And you work your way down, and you start building a fairly interesting demand curve. And once you have some sense of that, then you do a second wave, highly quantitative. I've had really good luck doing these with surveys, SurveyMonkey or whatever, where you're just asking a set of quantitative questions to build up a data set, so you can really look at your overall price sensitivity curve, your revenue with respect to price, and you can start teasing out, well, here's segment A, and here's segment B, and here's segment C, and here's what their individual demand curves look like. And so what I found, getting back to AI for just a second, is I episodically feed old data sets into the various AIs to see what they recommend. And no one's come up with quite the right answer yet, but they're getting really close. Right. They get the right answer if you assume there's one market segment, they come up with the right answer.
Right.
But they're not yet discerning that there are two market segments unless I tell them. But even so, at least so far, AI can't go do the surveys for you. They can't go do the interviews. They can't do the surveys. They can't, they can, you can start to, soon you'll be able to feed them the data sets and get the right answers out and get that done really quickly, but you still got to go do the research yourself.
You find that people are directionally honest, at least, if not, down to the percentage points that they're willing to pay, or the value that they see, to the point where it's predictive, where if the people in general were willing to pay 35% more, that you can deploy 35% more, or as you indicated, double it and make it 60 to 70% more, whatever.
Well, that's why you start with a crazy number, because you start learning where the breakpoints are.
Right.
And some people, of course, are lowballing you, and some people are being really, really honest. And some people, I find if you get a big enough data set, it kind of comes out in the wash. The company I mentioned earlier, the revenue forecast we did before changing pricing wound up being within 1.5% of reality. So that's, I'll take that. That's within margin of error. I'll take that
for sure.
Yeah. Now we did 250 interviews with that, but it was a B2C customer, right? A B2C company. So, if you're a B2B, you don't need nearly that level of responses.
So I'd love to get into sort of some of the marketing implications, and I don't know if you've got data to support any hypotheses here, but obviously, to some extent, pricing is irrelevant unless you actually make the sale, right? So to the extent that there are factors that may predict both the willingness of the person to convert, right, or to convert at a higher price point. So for example, social proof or testimonials, right? Do they end up having a positive influence on the willingness of a person to pay, outside of just what they would have gotten come in cold, right? So in other words, right messaging on landing pages and right messaging in marketing, do those have an implication on the ability to extract a higher price point?
I'd say there are two areas to poke on there. One is specifically what's on, as you just said, what's on the web page, right? What's the messaging? Well, the more that your language connects to your customer's value, the more they're going to pay, right? If your language is very technical, say, we have these 17 features that allow seamless peer-to-peer UI, UX communication between databases. Whew, that's a low price point, baby. That sounds like open source software to me. To the extent that you say, our seamless networking helps you grow revenue by 25% year on year. Okay, you've got my budget attention. Tell me more about how this works. So I think, and you can only get there as tech nerds, and I've been so guilty of this so many times, just unconsciously, we lead with the cool tech that we built. And the customers don't care if we've done it with the two gerbils, a spinning wheel, and some Raisin Bran, right? If it works, they'll pay for it. They don't, these days, okay, that's an exaggeration, obviously, but it's got to be secure. It's got to be blah, blah, blah. There's certain things, certain bars you have to clear. But beyond that, your code is your code. Who cares? Tell me what it does for me. The second point is, and this is outside my domain, but you see these things every year, the most valuable trademarks in the world: Nike, Microsoft, Coca-Cola, Procter and Gamble, right?
Branding,
whatever they
right, is brand value.
Right. Brand reputation matters. And you see companies who break away in each market segment because, and I think mostly it's because they deliver with consistency. They do what they say they'll do, and they get a reputation. Again, I'll go back a billion years, but the mantra used to be you couldn't be fired for buying IBM. And more recently, I saw an article, you can't be fired for hiring McKinsey. You can't be, pick your segment, right?
Yeah,
There's always going to be a safe choice because they've got the reputation and they can command a price premium. Look at Apple and the iPhones,
for sure.
right? I believe their margin is greater than anyone else's revenue per device. Why?
Yeah.
Why? Is it that much better? I mean, I love my iPhone. I've had an iPhone for as long as they've been around, but is it that much better than the others? I don't think so.
Great point. Great point. Thanks so much for sharing all of the pearls of wisdom with myself and the viewers and listeners. I think the implications on marketing are pretty profound of getting your pricing right. So thanks so much, Steve.
Hey, my pleasure. Happy to talk with you. We'll do it again someday.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.